Hi everyone, welcome to Historically Speaking, an online YouTube history channel focused on the history of various institutions and professionals, how history intersects with education, culture, equality, democracy, and the world around us. I'm Karen Yang, host of Historically Speaking. Today we're here with Naomi Coquillon, Chief of Informal Learning and the Informal Learning Offices at the Library of Congress. In this role, she's managed a lot of educators in developing different programs for families and kids and young audiences. She has also had a lot of experience within the Smithsonian museums, and we're just really excited to have her here today. Naomi, thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
No,
Um,
thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. Is there anything you'd like to add regarding who you are and what you do?
Just to say that I was really glad to have you as part of our pilot teen internship program this past summer. So I'm excited to talk with you about the library.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely really enjoyed my experience just like getting to see the behind the scenes of the Library of Congress and getting to see all this like unique work that's being put into making such a great kind of like institution work for everybody.
Mhm,
And I guess today we're going to be talking a lot about the idea of like informal learning or just like
mhm,
learning beyond the traditional sense with just textbooks or whether it be
mhm,
in classrooms. And I feel like the Library of Congress really does do a great job of seeing this through.
mhm.
I guess like one question I would have to start is how does the Library of Congress engage in informal learning?
Yeah, so informal learning, just for folks who may not know, I mean, as you said, it's beyond the classroom, but some of the principles of it are that that it's self-initiated and self-directed,
Mhm,
that it's participatory, that it's really based on conversation. So there are lots of ways in which the library has done that over time, and
mhm,
libraries are spaces for informal learning. They're places where you can follow your interests, follow your curiosity.
mhm,
um, but I'd say some of the projects that the library has undertaken in this space include, like, hands on carts, the
mhm.
Young Reader Center, which has been at the library for 12 years or so.
Oh, wow.
um, and But also, those are places for family learning. And our goal, our job is really, in this office, which is relatively new, is to pull some of those things together and to
Mhm,
highlight those opportunities, and to really infuse that thinking into all of our visitor engagement, and to build out some new spaces for young people. So, it's not that. Although our office is new, the informal learning isn't new to the library at all. It's
mhm,
just sort of new focus on it, I guess.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. I really like how you talked about how informal learning was really like kind of hands-on or
Hmm.
participant driven for sure.
Yep.
Because I feel like that's so true. And I think
Hmm.
that with a wide variety of resources that the Library of Congress offers with like videos and
Hmm.
blog posts and all of these different forms of engagement, it's
Hmm.
like mostly there for the audience to kind of like jump into watching the videos themselves
Hmm.
or like kind of like participating and interacting in that way.
Hmm.
Um, well, I know that you said that the informal learning office itself hasn't been like that long in its
Hmm.
history, I guess. Could you expand on like how the Library of Congress has engaged in informal learning in the past, or like what kind of principles this looked like in the past, I guess?
Yeah. Well, so how far in the past are you thinking? Like,
Mm,
historically, or or
I'm
I
like
mean,
I'm willing to
mhm.
go however far you're willing to go, I
Okay.
guess. Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, I'll say that, like, the library, well, and especially just thinking about the Thomas Jefferson Building, and I don't know how much I should back up and sort of talk about what the what the library is and does for the audience, but
Mhm,
um, it was a congressional library that expanded to become really a library for the people, and is a sort of de facto national library.
mhm,
And really, the Thomas Jefferson Building, which is the sort of jewel of the buildings on Capitol Hill,
mhm,
was built in part to encourage the public people to come and use it.
mhm,
It was open late so that people could come after work. And so, I should say that our office is focused really on kids, teens, and families, but informal learning happens for
mhm,
every, for across ages. This is not, so
mhm,
people were invited to come and explore. their own curiosity. So I would say like it's an underpinning of what the library has had for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to really thinking about the way that sort of more modern ways of thinking of informal learning, and
Mm-hmm.
founded on principles of like progressive education that are century old or more, but that field is a little bit newer, and that's sort of where our my expertise is, and where some of the staff in the Center for Learning, Literacy, and
Mm-hmm.
Engagement come
Yeah, for
from.
sure.
That's more recent, and I'd say the library has for a long time had guided tours, which are more on the sort of not docent led, but have also tried to incorporate more of sort of those informal learning principles in terms of starting with people's curiosity about what they're seeing in the building. But the hands-on cart program is only a few years old, but that's really sort of a prime example of a way in which you can share through object-based learning, some information about the library, but starting with what people are really curious about. So you have a variety of items and artifacts that you can begin with, but you're not sort of telling them or walking them through it necessarily. You're giving them the opportunity to ask questions and then have a conversation about it. And that's only within the last, I guess, 8 years, 7 years, something like that. I hope that helps give you a little bit of context. But
yeah, for sure. I think definitely, I think it's really interesting that this principle of informal learning, or this basis of it has such a long past, or it has been in the library's foundings from the very beginning, just being open really late for people after work to come and explore. And I really find it interesting seeing how this principle has transformed over time, or how that has manifested into different programs or different kind of learning opportunities. Could you talk about the hands-on learning card thing, I think?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And sorry, I'm at home and I can't give you example, but I can send you some photos if you do want to edit them in. But yeah, so let me back up and just ask if that means anything to you. What have you run into something like that in museums, or I know you weren't able to come to the library for your internship, so we couldn't show you there, but what does that mean to you, I guess?
I think maybe I feel maybe I've heard of this idea, but I haven't really concretely interacted with it for sure.
Yeah. So this is something that, I will say that this sort of hands-on experience with artifacts is what drove my professional life, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But it was an internship at the Smithsonian when I was in college that where I got to work in what was then called the Hands-on History Room. That made me realize sort of the power of teaching with objects, but also the power of conversation, the power of informal learning. But so that was 20 20 years ago or more, a little bit more. So this is not a new idea, but in any case, it's at the library, our focus is on, at least in these CART programs, is to bring both the collections and the building to life through these artifacts. So it could be a piece of marble, it could be for example, one that I made for the library when we had our exhibition on World War I, the centennial of the American entry into World War I, was a set of a soldier's footlocker, which was original to the time period, and I did the research behind it to draw out the soldier's story. And then it was, an opportunity for people are like, oh my, I'm really curious. This is a helmet. Is this for real? Is this a real helmet? Yes, it is. And then whose is it? And then you have a personal story, and I think that entry point into the larger story of World War I, instead of sort of walking you through, United States entered in April 1918, you're beginning with the curiosity of the things and the people, and then moving into some of the deeper questions of the history behind it.
For sure.
So yeah, so it's basically a hands-on card is artifacts that you can handle, but they're meant to be touchstones for larger conversations or questions in history that you can invite visitors into.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about just having this like one helmet or this like
Hmm.
one object, maybe like it be a stuffed animal or
Hmm.
something else like that for other like visitors to interact with.
Hmm.
I just think like definitely like history is, at least I find history to be really appealing in that you can see a lot of these different stories and these like
Hmm.
individuals living within this huge time period or within this event, and it kind of like humanizes the history. And I think like
Hmm.
what you're talking about with the artifacts definitely contributes to that message and contributes to that lesson. So
Hmm.
I think that's really, really cool for sure.
Well, and I think, this is one of the, the deep values of learning with primary sources, which is a big part of what the library does and tries to share with classrooms.
Hmm.
It is the personal story. And I must share a personal anecdote about like my realization of the importance of primary sources in my own
Hmm.
life and museums
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
In college, I all of my friends were on the medical track. They're all pre-med. They're all doctors now. And one of them, she was like, it will sound like a mean question, but she asked me one day, she's like, why do you study history? You're like, I mean, I was alone in that among my friends, but
Hmm.
so she was curious just because I was an outlier, but also she was like, it's over. So like, what's the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
She was a chemistry major, and I was like, what? Like, it's not. I mean, yes, but the choices people have made, the decisions, those affect us today. And like, I see
Hmm.
history all around us. I see it in all the ways that we interact. I mean,
Hmm.
we're seeing historical patterns playing out now, and the
Hmm.
current crisis in Europe, and like,
Hmm.
it's so it's like those foundations are so relevant. But to
Hmm.
her, because she'd learned history from a textbook as
Yeah.
facts and dates and things that happened that she had to memorize, like it wasn't relevant to her, and it wasn't alive. And I realized that I'd learned history by going to museums and like going to living history sites and
Hmm.
learning about the people behind them, and
Hmm.
really thinking about history as the story of individuals and their choices and the consequences of those for them and for us too. And
Hmm.
when I had that realization, that was part of what set me on this track to go do that
Hmm.
internship at the Smithsonian, because I realized that it was because of my experiences in
Hmm.
cultural institutions
Hmm.
that I had this other perspective,
Hmm.
that I you know led me down this path, to study history and then to do what I'm doing, but also to be able to share that with her. Because when I was able to share those values and that importance with her, it was helpful for her too. And in fact, she and I are still friends, and she said to me like several years ago, she's like, Naomi, I see all these pundits on TV, and but I really want to go. I try to go to the source. I try to find out, like, what was the actual testimony, and like, I want to see the
Yeah.
real. I want to see and then make my own interpretation, because you taught me that, about history. I mean, it sounds like I'm making it up. I swear to God, I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
But it did emphasize to me the importance of this kind of work, giving
Hmm.
visitors, kids and families the opportunity to kind of be introduced to that perspective as early as we can. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
actually like feel really strangely enough that I can like relate to this experience. Like most of my peers and my friends are all like very STEM oriented. They're like
Mm-hmm.
into biology and to all this like STEM, and like
Mm-hmm.
I guess we automatically kind of correlate STEM and science with the future because
Mm-hmm.
of I think even the COVID-19 pandemic really put that into perspective, and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we have to develop these things to be able to get back to normal or whatever that looks
Mm-hmm.
like. And yeah, with history, we're kind of instead looking the other way around. And it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, why are you guys looking the way around when we should be
Right.
looking and worrying about our future?
Mm-hmm.
And I think just like the idea that like history has so many lessons and repeats itself over and
Mm-hmm.
over again is
Mm-hmm.
something that I guess I'm learning through school and through
Mm-hmm.
like just like the Library of Congress and all these different
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And I definitely think that I can like, even though as you said your anecdote, you said that you're like, oh, I swear it was real. Like I feel like it is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I
I
feel
mean, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'm glad you're fighting that too, and it's because I mean, it is, well, and I think sometimes we feel divorced from the past, that or that there's this sense of inevitability, right, about the
Mhm.
things that happened. And it's like, no, there were, um you know, there were people living just like us now who were,
Hmm.
affected by events or were driving events, and we
Hmm.
are living in a moment that others will look back on too. And
Yeah.
so I like that sort of sense of yourself within the larger story has been a part of what has driven me in my career, and trying to help people sort of appreciate the personal experiences of the people in the past, but also recognizing that we're all agents of of change, and we're all, making history right now in our day-to-day lives, even if we don't feel like it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. It's just like
mhm,
with the crisis in Europe and with the
mhm,
coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think like
mhm,
me and my friends often joke that like, oh my goodness, like kids in 2070 are gonna have to read about this and learn about like what's going on right now in their
yeah,
history textbooks. And
yeah.
like, yeah,
I
and
mean, it's true. I guess we're in this moment. We do know people are going to look back on us, and but I think it's true. Even when we get out of the pandemic, our daily lives
Mhm.
will, you know, be the stuff of history in the future. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
No, no,
ahead.
no, no, totally. I totally agree. And it's just like that's why I think studying history and like engaging so actively in it,
Hmm.
as you said, really puts that into perspective and enables us to like make better choices or just like reflect more deeply or think more critically about what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're believing for
Hmm.
sure. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I guess like one last question. I think you've kind of
Hmm.
answered this with your personal anecdote, which I really, really loved. Um, so like what have you personally learned from working at the Library of Congress or at these different museums and institutions, I guess?
Um, well, I mean, I think what is just fascinating, and what keeps me motivated, is that I'm constantly learning. I mean, I like constantly learning content. I mean, the library's collections span time and the world. And so
Hmm.
I'm constantly
Hmm.
having opportunities to learn about new cultures, new moments in history. People sometimes like to ask, I don't know if this happens to you as someone who loves history, well, what's your favorite time period? And it's like,
Hmm.
I don't have a favorite time period. I'm curious about all of it.
Hmm.
So you know that's a I mean, I can't pinpoint what exact, like, the particular content I've learned, because I'm constantly learning, and I'm
Hmm.
endlessly curious about these things.
Hmm.
But I think, I've also just I've learned how meaningful they are to people. And I think, maybe because I was young. I mean, when I was younger, I was more focused on, like, I don't gotta figure out my future, and, like, what am I going to do. I was very focused on, myself, also thinking about my friend and wanting to make sure that there were other people who were having experiences that could teach them about history. But
Hmm.
but I having now been in the institutions, and really being a representative of the institution, one of my
Hmm.
jobs at Smithsonian was to travel around the country and work with educators to help classroom educators, to help them incorporate museum resources in the classroom. And there's just, there's such a love and appreciation for the work that these institutions do. And
Hmm.
it's a real privilege for those of us who work there to steward the collections, to find creative ways to share them, to help people feel connected,
Hmm.
even more deeply than they may already. So
Hmm.
I think that's something. I mean, maybe I sort of knew it, but I think I've, come to really appreciate and understand better over time, is um, how important these places are to how to people to people in the country, and how important
Hmm.
it is for us to be good stewards, and good connectors.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. I really like how
Mhm.
it's kind of the idea of connecting this history,
Mhm.
whether it be like a student learning more about America or like their own place in America's like society, culture, and history in that time period.
Mhm.
And I definitely feel like I still have so much learning to do and so much like interacting with history to do. I'm so excited to do it. But I really liked how you talked about how seeing how like history is very valuable to different
Mhm.
people in different ways and different time periods, etc.,
Mhm.
is really, really interesting for sure. And like that connection and like the fact that history can bring a lot of people together with
Mhm.
like shared backgrounds, shared culture, and like a shared moment
Mhm.
in time is definitely really, really cool as well. Yeah.
And shared understanding too. Yeah. And I think, I mean, also just thinking too about um, the skills of history. This idea of
Mhm.
really, be pulling different perspectives together and creating your own understanding of it, and making sure that you're considering, trying to get at the not resting on what how others have necessarily interpreted, or making sure that you're getting sort of the full story, looking to the sources to make your interpretation. Like those are really important things, and they're they're not they're science. I don't want to compare it to science, but I think I think those essential skills are really valuable and important, in addition to the learning about historical patterns and cultures over time and stuff, which is also important. So
For sure.
anyway,
Yeah, it's like it's all kind of interconnected between like individuals and different fields too. Like even STEM, like science has so much history too, and that influences like what people are doing in that field. And it's like even math and like all of these different things. It's definitely like everything has history. And if we learn to see the value in it, it'll definitely be like, ooh, much better. For sure.
Yeah. And the scientific method too has a lot to offer, and it has some similarities to the way in which you would investigate a question
For
in
sure.
history. So
For sure. Okay, so I'm gonna be wrapping up the interview. Thank you so much for talking to me about your experience at the Library of Congress and what history means, and like informal and learning and all the different ways that these kind of fields just like interact with one another and like create new meaning and kind of dictate what we see about the past and what we see about the future and stuff like that. Are there any like last remarks or any last thoughts that you want to get at, I guess?
No, just thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. It's been lovely, and I look forward to seeing more of your episodes and seeing what you do in the future and where you go with your interest in history. So
Yeah, of
thanks.
course. Thank you so much.